Nowadays, you're just like, it's so wasteful to be buying so many things.
The way people consume and use and throw away, this is not how the earth is designed.
The use of resources at a rate that exceeds the ability to replace them. The human population has been allowed and encouraged to overconsume, use and abuse our natural resources to a point where society is in trouble. In other words, as a global population, we have not only become unsustainable, but are soon looking closer to our own extinction. The citizens of our world today have many wants and needs. Those needs must be fulfilled in order to live, and there is a finite amount, but wants is a different story. A human want is not necessary in someone's life, but it is something that they desire. There is a never-ending amount of wants for humans, and this is the problem. We are never satisfied with what we have, but instead we always look for something more. Then, when we are done with that item, we go out and look for the next new thing, and it is an ongoing cycle that is ruining our planet. People may begin to realize just how unsustainable our current human population is on planet Earth. In the past 30 years, we have consumed 30% of Earth's natural resources. The worst part is that only mankind can even replenish a few of these resources, such as forests. To give some indication of the severity of this crisis, we now only have 20% of old growth forests remaining, and 75% of fisheries are producing at or above capacity. The US, being the most abusive global consumer with only 5% of the world population, accounts for 30% of the annual worldwide consumption. Recycling is the option that everyone likes to throw out as the way to save our planet and achieve sustainability. But this is only because people don't have all the facts. The fact is that for every 1 can of waste that's created by consumers, corporations create 70 cans. This means that consumers account for discarding only 1.4% of all natural resources that end up as waste. Unfortunately, the majority of waste that's created by corporations and consumers is toxic and unable to be recycled. Recycling 100% of consumer waste, or in other words, the entire 1.4% of the total waste. What we don't know is that only about 15% of that waste is actually capable of being recycled. This means that in the best circumstance, only 0.2% of the consumer waste can be reused. The rest still ends up as waste. The population has been brainwashed into believing that consumers are responsible for the problem and that all we need to do is home recycling to fix the problem. The bottom line is that unless we achieve a high enough recycling rate for corporate waste, recycling would not enable us to achieve anything except awareness. We don't know how long we have before we consume enough of Earth's natural resources so that human life is no longer sustainable. But we do know that 30% of Earth's natural resources have been consumed in the past 30 years. Now, researchers predict that it is likely that the human population is to consume another 30 to 40% of Earth's remaining resources within the next 10 years. This means that around the year of 2020, mankind can potentially consume up to 80% of Earth's natural resources. Many would probably like to assume that we have years to fix this problem, but this also assumes that we don't run out of some essential resources before then. For example, what would happen if 100% of drinkable water, forests, coal, and so on runs out before then? Here's an example in the United States on how much humans are over-consuming Earth's resources.
1/3 of the planet's natural resource base has been consumed. Gone. We are cutting and mining and hauling and trashing the place so fast that we're undermining the planet's very ability for people to live here. Where I live, in the United States, we have less than 4% of our original forests left. 40% of the waterways have become undrinkable. And our problem is not just that we're using too much stuff, but we're using more than our share. We have 5% of the world's population, but we're using 30% of the world's resources and creating 30% of the world's waste. If everybody consumed at US rates, we would need 3 to 5 planets. And you know what? We've only got 1. So my country's response to this limitation is simply to go take somebody else's. This is the third world, which some would say is another word for our stuff that somehow got on somebody else's land. So what does that look like? The same thing, trashing the place. 75% of global fisheries now are fished at or beyond capacity. 80% of the planet's original forests are gone. In the Amazon alone, we're losing 2,000 trees a minute. That is 7 football fields a minute.
In our environment, in terms of biodiversity loss, our report tells us that of 2,500 species tracked as measures of planetary health, since 1970, there's been a global loss of 30% of them, with 60% losses seen in the tropics. Shockingly, 70% of freshwater tropical species have been lost, the highest level of species decline measured on land or in oceans. Breaking down biodiversity loss along nation income lines, the greatest declines are seen in low-income nations, with 60% loss in the past 40 years.
The impact of overconsumption affects the population differently in specific regions. As seen in this picture, 37% of total ecological footprint is used by some of the richest economies, which includes 31 countries. On the other hand, some of the 63 poorest countries only use 12% of the ecological footprint. Overconsumption therefore has different effects on different types of populations and on different regions.
Here is a graph to show how bad the ecological footprint of the high-income countries is getting. Between 1961 and 2003, the ecological footprint of the high-income countries has basically doubled, while the low and medium-income countries haven't changed. This shows how the richer countries are causing much more damage to the world because of the money that they have and because they have the largest consumer societies. A major problem in our world today is that everybody always wants to buy the next cool thing. Even if they have the same item but the older version, and it still works perfectly fine, they'll trash that one and buy the new one. This creates many problems because the companies will have to make more and more items, which will waste many of the world's precious resources. This is why we are beginning to run out of those resources. In the previous days, the companies would not make new products as quickly, which means they would not need to use all the resources to have the material to construct them, and there would be a lot more available. But if we continue at these economic and population growth rates, then by 2030 we will need 2 Earths. It is the developed countries like Canada, the United States, and China that are harming our planet the most. The inhabitants of these countries are always looking to buy more products. People in rich countries consume up to 10 times more natural resources than those in the poorest countries. On average, an inhabitant of North America consumes around 90 kilograms of resources each day, compared to people in Africa who only consume around 10 kilograms. Can you imagine that everyone lived like these rich countries? Our planet would be inhabitable and mankind would be extinct. If everyone lived like the average American, according to the Global Footprint Network, the Earth could sustain only 1.7 billion people, which is a quarter of today's population. Also, humans overconsume because of their unlimited wants, not their needs.
Humans overconsume so much. For example, an average person uses about 123 gallons or 466 liters of water daily. Also, people tend to spend more than they have. Today, you can buy something and only pay for it years later. People buy things that they don't need because their wants are unlimited, and that causes the overconsumption of products. In addition, in one's lifetime, they nearly consume over 5,000 newspapers, nearly 13,000 oranges, nearly 4,000 diapers, over 12,000 hamburger buns, and over 30,000 gallons of gas.
In conclusion, overconsumption is a situation that is ruining our planet. We are using all of our resources faster than we can remake them, and if we continue to act at this pace, Earth will become inhabitable. Is it really worth buying that extra t-shirt next time you're at the mall? Is it really worth buying the new version of the iPhone when your old iPhone works perfectly? The world is in our hands, and the future depends on us. If we continue acting this way, there won't be a future for our grandkids. But if we smarten up and change our approach on consuming, then we can all make a difference and help make the world a better place.